No part of this podcast has been generated by AI. No better way to step into episode 4 than by having Isa Sofia on the show. Isa's gentle heart and grounded presence connects like a warm summer breeze. Her free to roam childhood tuned her inner compass to wisdom beyond her years. She learned early what feels right and how to appreciate the differences this world has to offer. From moving 18 times before she was 18 over 3 different countries, no formal education, and a freedom that could only make or break someone. She channeled her experiences and started her first company at the age of 16, growing it into the largest beverage product of its kind in Eastern Europe. I'm so excited to share a Gen Z shining light and a wonderful storyteller here for you today. I'll also be sharing my reflections after the podcast. But until then, sit back and enjoy the adventures of Isa Sofia. All right, Isa, welcome on the program.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, how's everything going?
It's going good. I mean, we're here in Vietnam and we're in your little studio that you built, which is so beautiful. And I'm happy to be a part of this podcast. So,
Oh, it's a pleasure to have you on. Let's take it back to the beginning. Where did you grow up?
I grew up across 3 continents, so it's quite the story to tell. But I was born in Slovenia, and then when I was 3 years old, me and my parents immigrated to the U.S. We set up base there, and then I grew up being unschooled in Colorado. So that was kind of my childhood. And my parents started a company when I was 7 years old, and we ended up moving to India also because we didn't have enough funds to continue living in the U.S. And then I moved around in the U.S. So a total of maybe 18 times I've moved, and I ended up back in Slovenia. So
Wow, 18 times to the age of,
to the age of, I would say, 18.
wow,
Yeah, yeah,
incredible.
yeah.
And so do you remember the early years in Slovenia?
Mm, Not necessarily, only from what my mom told me, but we were living in like basically a little attic area above some animals in a little remote village in Slovenia that was probably, I don't know, 30 minutes to the city center. And it was a very simple life. I mean, I was with my mom and my dad was learning how to lay tiles. So that was it.
So then what took the family over to the States?
I think my mom started feeling a little ostracized, and she only knew how to speak Serbian, and the language there was Slovenian. So when she would speak Serbian, people just wouldn't treat her the same. And my mom's also half Indian, so she got a little bit of, people weren't very nice to her in certain situations. So I think she also just missed home, and she wanted to raise a family in the U.S.
Yeah, fair enough.
Yeah.
And what was the Colorado experience like?
Colorado experience was beautiful. I grew up in Boulder, Colorado.
Wow.
So just surrounded by nature and surrounded by creeks and mountains. And we lived a very untraditional life. So me and my siblings were all unschooled, which means basically we had no structure and we kind of just lived and learned with life.
Wow. And how many siblings do you have?
I have 3 brothers and 1 sister and 1 half sister. And I'm the oldest. So yeah.
How has it been the oldest growing up?
Um, Overall, it's a lot of responsibility for sure, and I feel like also just being in that situation and not having school to go to every day, it was kind of just like I was leading my own little army. And we were, getting up to different adventures, and we lived first in this part called North Boulder, and then when I was about 9 years old, we bought a house and we renovated it ourselves. So I started smashing down walls and things like that and ripping up the carpet. And that was in Gun Barrel. So the most beautiful part about that neighborhood was that our backyard opened up to this open space where there
Wow.
were thousands of wild horses.
Really?
Yeah,
Wow.
yeah.
So this is just in your backyard looking at thousands of wild horses.
Yeah. They would rotate them so they wouldn't be there all year, but that was like a place where they would hold the horses before they would go to like different places around Colorado. And me being a kid, I was just fascinated with animals and with plants. That was basically my main thing. And I remember I actually ended up wrapping yarn around the barbed wire and pinching it so I could sneak through and just go be with the horses all day.
Wow.
And I'd take a little basket, and there was these magnificent apple trees that were huge, and they were wild apple trees. And I would go and I just climb these apple trees and pick the apples, and I just feed the horses. And looking back now, I was like, wow, like that's kind of dangerous, seeing as like none of them were trained or anything, and it was just like all wild. But I remember being this fearless little 9-year old and just being like, I just trust them and I trust that they're not going to hurt me. So,
Wow, that's
yeah.
beautiful. And so, was there homeschooling in the way of like, was there structure around the day, or what does an average day look like with siblings,
Mm.
mum and dad, full nature?
No, so there wasn't actual structure until I was like, I would say 13. Before then, I taught myself everything I needed to know. So it was very beautiful in a sense because I really got to focus on my passions. And I don't know, one of my first passions was survival camp. So it was really cool because Colorado did and does have the infrastructure for homeschoolers.
Mm.
So they had this thing called Feet on the Earth, and basically a bunch of homeschoolers would go 2 to 3 times a week, and you just be outside in nature, and you'd have these teachers that were just like survival experts, and they teach you everything from making fire to making shelter to gathering different herbs to skinning animals. Even like it got kind of crazy, but it was a beautiful experience overall that really taught me a lot and just really connecting. And a lot of the teachers we had there wouldn't even wear shoes, and they were like just so grounded and so connected to the land, and it was a beautiful thing. And then I remember in 2012 or 2013 there was this huge flood in Colorado, and basically we had to move spaces. So the place that we had the Feet on the Earth camp was at another location, and then we ended up going back a couple months later and just seeing how powerful the water was and how it completely changed the whole environment. And there was just sand and trees and rocks, and it was like completely different land than what I remembered. And essentially how it was kind of like this grand adventure of just, figuring out and like exploring the land in a new light.
Wow,
Yeah.
incredible. And so, how many other was it children of all ages participating?
Yeah, so there was different clans. I was part of this one clan called Raccoon Clan, and we'd go there, and there'd be like 4 or 5 different clans, and then we'd have like even sometimes we'd have competitions against each other, like who could make I don't know who could make fire faster in a group, or who could filter water and bring it from point A to point B, and different things like that, which was just I don't know it gave me so much to actually be in that setting. And yeah, and then also one of my passions was making cakes.
Beautiful.
So I took this one class at this place called Michael's. It's like a local craft store that's pretty corporate, but they have they had cake making classes twice a week. And I'd go, and I just remember being the youngest one by far, like a little kid there, and there's all these ladies around me, but I was just so excited and wanted to learn how to make cakes beautiful and how to actually make little flowers and little things and put them on top of each other. And then my end kind of project with that part of my life was I ended up in 2014 I made my aunt's wedding cake.
Amazing. How beautiful.
So that was beautiful. So overall, I think my childhood definitely gave me the space to really hone in on my passions. And then I would have friends. So when we were in that space in Gun Barrel, we also lived next to government housing. So I'd say the majority of my friends were Mexicans or different people that were kind of, their parents were in and out of jail. There was problems at home. There were things like that. But that also just gave me such a worldly perspective into different kinds of families and different kinds of problems from a really young age, and kind of reading different unhealthy dynamics and kind of just figuring it out. but I'd always be the one that kind of just be waiting for them at the bus station for them to come back from school, and then just be like, let's go on an adventure. And we'd like go and do, I don't know, we'd play that we were archaeologists and we'd dig up coyote bones, or we'd go and like find a tire in this like open space. And like I remember we wheeled, I actually have a picture on my phone somewhere, I'll find it, but we had this tire that we found on the other side of the open space, and we wheeled it all the way back. And it took us like an hour, and then we ended up making it into a sandbox, and it was like a huge like tractor tire. But I was always the kid in my neighborhood that was like, okay, like they went to school and then I'd wait for them, and then we'd do some kind of adventure in that sense. And then when I started to feel a little bit behind in like, I don't know, reading and math and things like that, I just started watching different YouTube videos and started kind of teaching myself. But it was a very untraditional approach, because usually, even with homeschooling, your parents sit you down in the morning and they're like, okay, we're going to learn how to read, or we're going to learn how to do math. With my family, there was never that. So it was just kind of, okay, let's wake up, let's make breakfast, let's maybe bike to the library, or maybe let's go on this walk or this hike or something like that. But when it came to actual like things that were being taught, I had to teach myself everything.
Was that a conscious choice by your parents, just allowing that much freedom,
Yeah.
and you kind of somewhat figuring it out for yourself?
Yeah, that was a conscious choice. I think they both made that decision together, just because they both really struggled in the school system and never felt like they were seen or heard. And they also had very toxic family dynamics. So they're always kind of, they just wanted to give us a lot of freedom, I feel like, because they believe that you can learn a lot from the world, essentially. So,
Yeah.
yeah.
And in especially in those early years, was the same amount of freedom applied to all of your siblings?
Yeah. I would say for the most part, yes. My dad ended up kind of taking over. So my mom and my dad started a company together in 2007.
Hmm.
They started making baby carriers,
Amazing.
and that was the whole life. So I grew up from a very young age just kind of being immersed in the startup culture and the startup life, and just having a lot of moving parts and teams that were growing and going to different team buildings, and kind of always just being surrounded with older people and like having like a vision, like, okay, we're building this brand, right? And
Mm.
back then it was like they were, coding their own websites and doing everything by hand, and it was a lot more intense, I feel like, than it is nowadays. But yeah, it got to a certain point where I think my dad was like, okay, you need to decide if you want to be like a full-time mother, or if you want to be like full-time in this business. And my mom decided to be a full-time mother and to really just give all the time to us. So then what ended up happening was my dad was kind of building this business and my mom was kind of raising us, and that's kind of how we grew up. So,
Wow.
yeah.
And how was that? Because I mean, at that age, to be able to select what you want to learn, and connect with these survival communities, and also like the cake making, things like that. Like, how was that in terms of the way you adapted to learning?
Um I think it was beautiful because everything was unknown, right? There was nothing that was just being poured into me. Everything that I wanted to learn, I had to seek out for myself. And there's this one lady, she's actually a very important lady in my life. Her name's Peggy. And I met her when I was, I would say, 6 years old at the local coffee shop. And she's just this beautiful Jewish lady that actually, she went to Harvard Law, and she was this like criminal offense attorney for a really long time. And then she completely turned her life around, moved to Boulder, became a dog walker, never got married, never had kids, and just had this very simple way of living and had the same routine. And still today, she has the same routine. But yeah, I think meeting her at 6 years old, she just kind of took me under her wing because I didn't grow up with any of my grandparents nearby. We are kind of just, my mom went to college in Colorado and we decided to move there because she wanted to raise a family there, but we didn't have any extended family. So I was kind of always branching out and like looking for different, grandma and grandpa figures. And she just, yeah, she taught me how to play backgammon, and I'd walk dogs with her. And in my mind as a 6 year old, she was my friend, and there wasn't anything weird with that, right? Where I feel like school kind of makes you think that, like, okay, I'm born this year, and all of these other people are born this year. So this is the group of people that I need to be surrounded with constantly, right? Whereas I never had that, so I've always kind of just been, that's why I do feel like I'm quite the old soul, because I've always just kind of been connecting with different people that have different life experiences, different ages. I never like to label someone just off of their age, essentially. Like, you need to actually get to know the person, right?
Definitely. I mean, it's kind of like just, going off somebody's title of what they do for work and things like that. And that's like their main premise. But I mean, it sounds like there's just so much freedom in the way of the limitlessness that comes from connecting with people.
Yeah.
Beautiful. And then, so at the age of 7, and your parents then, what do they sit you down and say, hey, we're thinking about moving to India?
Yeah, that was actually I remember the conversation actually. So when the first place that we lived in Boulder was this studio apartment essentially, and there was 4 of us at the time. So we moved there when there was just 3, and then my brother was born shortly after. Um, and we didn't even have a table. So we kind of just ate lentils and beans and rice and sat on the floor, and it was a very simple life, but it also gave me a lot. And after my parents started the company, so my dad started laying tiles full time in Colorado when we moved there because he got all of his experience in Slovenia. And he started this basically bathroom flipping company with one of his friends, and they started remodeling these bathrooms, and they moved on to apartments. And although he was making really good money, he was on his knees 16 hours a day, and I never saw him. And when I did see him, he was super tired, and maybe, I don't know, once a week he'd read me a bedtime story, but that's about all I got. But I kind of understood still as a kid though that like he was putting in this work to build something else. And then when they started the company, I think they invested all of their savings, which was probably back then about $10,000, into the company. And I remember my dad sitting down with us and just being like, we don't have enough money to continue living here. Like, we've put all of our life savings into this company, and I know that I can manage it essentially remotely. And he was like, we're going to pack 1 suitcase. So, family of 4, we had 1 suitcase. And that was literally a carry-on suitcase. We didn't even get a checked one. So it was like very, very simple living. And he's like, we're going to move to India for a year. And honestly, as a kid, I remember just being super excited because my mom is half Indian, and she never really got that direct connection to the culture because she didn't grow up with her dad. Her dad is Indian. So I remember just being super excited and being like, wow, we're just gonna go live on the other side of the world. Like, this is so cool. But also just giving all of our things away, right? Because we didn't have anywhere to put it. We didn't really have money to get a storage unit. So just donating all of our belongings, having 1 carry-on suitcase, and just kind of moving to India. And I don't know, living in India was one of the highlights of my childhood for sure. We lived in a 1-bedroom, just like 1 room essentially, in this guest house. It was called the Moon Cafe. And it was so beautiful. It was a concrete bed with like a straw mattress that was about this thick. And we had to go and buy our sheets and everything. And then they had shared squat toilets that you could use. But I grew up there essentially having my dad go to internet cafes every day and grow his business remotely from India back then, which is really inspiring. I feel like that he did it back then, right?
Yeah. What year was this?
The first time we moved to India, if I'm not mistaken, I think was 2000, 2008.
Wow. Growing an online business in 2008.
Yeah.
Wow. Mate, do you remember the moment you landed in India?
Yeah, it was very overwhelming. There was a lot of people, and my parents are very, I would say, slow budget travelers, and I have so much respect for it now being an adult myself. But we flew into a part of Rajasthan. I don't exactly remember where, but it was a very big city, and there was a lot going on. And then we started hauling our little carry-on suitcase with us, and we had to take, like, I remember 4 or 5 buses to get to our final destination. And I don't know if you know what an Indian bus looks like. Yeah, I think you have been to India. But
Yeah, I've been to India 4 times.
yeah, yeah. So
Yeah.
it's just like people laying on top of each other, and then everyone's on the roof, and then it's like trying to like just squeeze in there somehow. But I would say It was kind of overwhelming to me, but it was also very exciting. I was like, wow, there's just so much going on and there's so many people.
Mm.
And the first place that we lived in, actually, we're also next to government housing. So I always had that kind of international, I would say, approach and like knew different people. But being there, I was like, wow, this is like a whole different thing. I was like,
Mm.
whoa. So I don't know. I would say when people ask me where I'm from, it's like I'm kind of from the world. Like literally, I think the first trip I took, I was 8 months old, and we went overland from Slovenia to Turkey. And it was just like I don't remember it, but the stories I've heard, it was just a beautiful experience. And like back then, my
Mm.
parents would just meet different families, and the families would just invite them to stay with them, because they had a baby. And like there was no hotels, there was no hostels, there was no, it was like very like slow kind of just
Mm.
beautiful approach and just meeting people where they're at and just having, strangers essentially invite us into their home. So
Did you also have the same dynamic where guests would always be coming around and like, connecting with people and your parents' friends?
yeah, our apartment and our houses have always been very open. So we always had people coming and going, whether that be, I don't know, different family and friends from Slovenia, from Croatia. And then we had this one girl that was named Lydia, and she was an exchange student from Sweden, if I'm not mistaken. But she wanted to do an exchange, and she came and she lived with us, and it was a beautiful experience because she was telling us all about her culture, and me and my brother were really little at the time, and then she'd take us to parks and play with us and things. So that was really nice. But we were definitely very, yeah, we never even locked our door. So
Yeah.
yeah, it was a very different approach, but I'm very grateful for it.
And so did you make friends quickly when growing up in India?
I did. But
Yeah.
like I said, like there was this one lady, oh, I don't remember her name, but she was Israeli, I believe, and she was beautiful. She was just there. She had a guitar and she just played the guitar. And I didn't know how to read at the time when I first moved there. And she just start singing different lyrics. And the more she sang them, the more I kind of catch on to them. And then I started singing with her. And then fast forward the second time we moved to India when I was about 10 years old. I had my first ever rooftop concert at the guest house. We always went back to the same place, so it was kind of like returning to another home.
Wow.
Yeah.
And so the first time living in India, how long were you there for?
I'm pretty sure we were in Pushkar, which is a part of Rajasthan. We were there for around 6 months. And then I think we moved to Goa for another 6 months. So
Okay.
that was our first trip.
Wow. So as your dad said, it was a year trip.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
And then was the business, the company taking off at this stage?
Yeah. So
Wow.
the business started actually taking off. I think they started off with manufacturing in the US and saw that it just didn't make sense.
Mm.
And then they actually moved the manufacturing for a period of time to India. So it was actually the carriers and the wraps for the babies were being manufactured in India. So my dad was actually on the same time zone, and he had good communication. He was even taking some trips to go and to the factory and see and oversee how the wraps were being made.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Did you accompany him doing these little
I
trips?
didn't, sadly. My dad is a very love him so much, but he's a very traditional man. So even as I was getting older and older, it was like I was the girl, and like my younger brother, which is 3 years younger than me, he was like the boy. So he would kind of go on the business trips with him,
Okay.
which is kind of funny because in the end, I was the person who started the business in the family. But
Yeah, yeah.
yeah, yeah.
What's your dad's cultural background?
Uh, my dad is half, he ended up finding out, he grew up thinking he was half Serbian and half Croatian,
Mhm.
but he found out that his father wasn't his actual father a couple years back. So he's actually half Slovak and half Croatian, but he grew up in Slovenia.
Okay.
Yeah,
Wow.
yeah.
And so this 12-month period is finished in India. Then where did you guys go from there?
Then we went back to the same apartment complex, but we got a bigger apartment. So we had a 1 bedroom now.
Wow.
They had a separate bedroom. We weren't sleeping in the same room. So,
How did it feel to upgrade a little bit in that way?
oh, it was beautiful. It was like we actually had an upstairs, and it was like a little bit of separation between the place that we ate and we slept. So it was nice, but we still, we had mattresses on the floor and everything was very simple. But I don't know, reflecting back on that period right now, I feel like that definitely shaped me like who I am as a person, and like I'm really not attached to material things. Like I have little trinkets that, you know, have some kind of sentimental value. But as for like wanting more and more, I've never been that kind of way. And I feel like reflecting back to my childhood, that's played a big part.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
Well, not many people at the age of 7 have to really like let everything go
Hmm.
and then pack your bag and your whole family into one bag and then head over to India. So
Yeah.
amazing. And so when you got back, so where did you move to? Sorry, from India?
We moved back to Colorado.
So back to
So back to the
Colorado.
same apartment complex, but we were upstairs first and then we moved downstairs and we had a bigger place.
Amazing. And so how
Yeah.
long were you in Colorado that time?
I think we moved back to Colorado for I think 3 years.
Yeah,
Yeah.
beautiful.
Yeah.
Was Peggy still around? Was it?
Yeah. So
Yeah.
it was beautiful. It's like my relationship with Colorado. It's like I always kind of go back and connect with people. And to this day, I have some friends that I've known since I was 4 years old, 3 years old. And it's really nice to reconnect with them. But it's always, yeah, I would say that deep down it is kind of my home because I spent some very beautiful childhood years there for sure.
Beautiful. So this was from 8 to the age of 11,
Yeah.
around there.
Yeah.
Where did you go after that?
Age 11, we actually we moved to Massachusetts,
Okay.
which is another crazy plot twist. But my mom grew up in Massachusetts, so that's her home, and she wanted to be closer to family. That was the reason we moved. And my parents decided that they needed a little bit more time because there was already three of us and my mom was pregnant again. So the family was growing, and they decided that they wanted a little bit more time to themselves. So they found this super super alternative school in Massachusetts. I don't even know if I'd call it a school, but it was called is called Sudbury Valley, and it's basically the concept of the school. It's a mansion. It's like quite a dated mansion on about 10 acres of land, and the only thing you do it's for kids ages 4 to like 21, so it's like the whole span.
Wow.
And the only thing you have to do is sign in when you're on campus and then sign out when you leave campus.
Oh.
And there's no teachers. They have staff that have different kind of. There's like one lady that's like super into the arts. There's one lady that's more into one guy that's more into IT.
Mm.
There's another lady that's more into like I don't know landscaping. Like there's like a lot of different people like that. But um, I would say that when I went to this school, it was me, my brother, and my little sister that went at the time. I think I was 11, my brother was like 7, and my little sister was like 4. And we got enrolled in the school, and all of a sudden it was just like, wow, like I learned a lot of my, I would say, social abilities there and like how to just relate and be in different kind of like clique situations and be with different groups and kind of evolve with different friends. Um, but basically, the rules there, they had a judicial committee,
Okay.
which was so interesting. And this judicial committee that they had was run by the students at the school. So the whole school, there was probably around 200 kids. It was quite a small school.
Mm.
And every month, there would just be a paper on the door of the JC room, the Judicial Committee room, and there'd be 4 people that were selected from the whole school. And if you were on the committee, you had to show up every single day at like 11 and be there for like 2 hours. And basically, if anyone broke a rule or if anyone did something, you'd bring them up. So you'd
Mm.
have a paper, any age too, right? The 4-year-olds could bring someone up for saying something mean to them or breaking something or whatever. And you'd write the person's name and then you'd explain what they did. And then it'd go into this drawer. And then the next day it'd be reviewed and the person would be called in and the person that brought them up would be called in and they'd come to some kind of agreement. So
Wow.
say, I don't know, I think some of the worst ones were like a couple people got caught smoking weed
Hmm.
and they'd come in and one of the guys actually got suspended for like 3 weeks. Another one got expelled because he got caught 4 times doing it. But like there was more extreme cases like that. But then there were also cases where it was like, this person stole 3 of my granola bars that I had in my cubby, right? And then it was kind of just like, okay, like figuring out like how do we actually like, solve this in like a friendly way. And like the point was like just to make the 2 people, the person that brought the person up and other people kind of have like an agreement that felt fair to both of them. So,
Wow.
yeah.
I mean, that's beautiful. It's in a way of really like proactively addressing,
Hmm.
both sides of the story and feeling comfortable within the conclusion.
Yeah.
It's pretty powerful.
No, it was a beautiful experience. I played a lot of sports. They had a gymnastics area, so I did a lot of different flips and things. They had a trampoline, they had arts, and then they had this old TV that was in the basement with these like really old like VCRs, and they'd
Wow.
have like all the old horror movies. So I'd like go down there with my friends and be like, "Are we gonna watch this?" And be like, "Yeah, we're gonna watch this." And then I played a lot of basketball with the guys too, and kind of just really got into sports. I would say that overall it was a very good experience, but I think the one thing that they should have been more strict about was technology, because
Mm.
you'd have, the gaming table or the people that would just, literally set up their computer, crack a dawn right when they got to school, and then just be on it and have like a little cup of instant noodles next to them and just not move the whole day.
Wow.
And I feel like as technology started evolving, and at the time I feel like that was when I got Snapchat, so that's literally when I was 11 years old and when I first got the app. And the apps were a lot more innocent back then than they are today, right?
Mm.
But still, I feel like all of a sudden people just felt a lot more disconnected, and like instead of actually proactively learning different things and problem solving, it was just like, okay, like let's be on my phone and like send this person a Snapchat, or kind of just like there was that disconnect. But I feel like the school started like 60, 70 years ago, and like back then I feel like it would have been absolutely like amazing
Mm.
with like no technology, right?
Yeah. Oh, so you're saying that having technology was a
I
little
think
bit.
it should have been enforced a bit more
Yes,
from my
yes,
point
yes.
of view. Yeah.
So as like a daily structure within that, so you could just, for example, you'd be outside playing sport, doing things, and then you feel like, oh, I want to do a bit of art. So you kind of mosey on
Mhm.
into the art room.
Yeah, so there was no structure, so you built your own structure.
Wow.
Right? So it was just like this open house that had like chairs and different things, and an art studio. They had a pottery studio. They had the basement. They had a ping pong table down there. They had a pool table. And it was kind of just, yeah, connecting with the different people that were there, and then kind of figuring out how to move throughout your day.
Amazing.
Yeah.
I feel like you really just like lean into your own intuition of like what you felt and what you felt comfortable with.
Yeah.
Wow, that's
And then it
beautiful.
was fun because we did have some like, I don't know, we made up our own game that was called like handball. And it was basically soccer, but you like keep the ball in your hand. And I don't
Mm.
know if we made it up or if it's a thing, but we ended up organizing really big games with like 60 people, right? And there's a lot of logistics already, and we were super young, but I think sports was the thing that got me through that time, because it was so beautiful to just have so many people, so many different backgrounds, ages, just like all playing the sport together and all being just super excited and having this huge, just like grassy area and this huge backyard. So,
Amazing.
yeah.
And so at this stage, did you have a phone yourself? You said you had Snapchat and things like that. You know, how would like paint the picture of like what it was like to grow up in that time, that era with social medias and
Mm.
things like that?
Yeah, so I got a phone when I was 11.
Okay.
And I remember I got it on my birthday. And then a few months later, we ended up moving to Massachusetts. So I got it in Gun Barrel when we were still in Colorado. And I remember my friend, she came over one day and she was like, there's this new app. It's called Instagram. Like, you need to, like, it's really cool. Like, you just connect with your friends. And I remember just like not fully understanding what it was. I was like, what do you mean? Like, I just call my friends, or like I see my friends. What do you mean I need to be connected with them, right? And she ended up convincing me to get it. So I got Instagram, and back in the day, I posted like my first ever Instagram post was Olaf, which is from Frozen, the movie, the little guy. And I made him out of snow and I posted him, and I thought it was so cool. And then I posted a few pictures of flowers, and I had like, I don't know, 20 followers that were like my friends from the neighborhood, right? And I was like, whoa, like this is like an interesting. And then there was only like two functions on Instagram. Like you could like share a post, and you could see what your other like friends were like liking,
Mm.
so you can kind of like gauge like what they're interested in. But there was no explorer page, there was no reels, there was no, it was just very kind of simple photo sharing. And then when I moved to Massachusetts and I got Snapchat, in the beginning I just didn't understand. I was like, why do we just need to send like pictures of like half of our face to each other? Like this doesn't make any sense. And they're like, no, like it's cool. And they kept just saying it was cool, and I was like, okay, I guess it's cool. And then the whole thing started with the, I feel like that's when they were like testing out the whole like, or the algorithm was starting to grow. It was like, okay,
Mm.
the Snapchat streak. So you could have a streak with your friends, and you have a little fire emoji, and then you have a number next to it, and it's like the higher the streak you have with your friends, so the more days that you've continuously communicated back and forth or sent pictures to each other back and forth, the higher the number grows. So
Mm.
like people with like the biggest streaks were like the coolest people back in the day,
Wow.
essentially. Yeah.
It sounds like you're already questioning and very conscious around what the dynamic of
Mm.
social media from a very young age. Did you notice within your friends the change or their mental health or anything of that nature?
Yeah. I noticed definitely that the more people started, you know, and then it got really weird because we were in the school and there was no rules and there was no structure and everything. And people were Snapchatting people in the other rooms. And I was just like, what do you mean? Like, they're just, let's walk over there and talk to them instead of sending them a Snapchat with a message, you know, and then waiting for the reply. But I do feel like it definitely had an effect on my friends there,
Mm.
especially because there were no rules and there was no structure, and they were just kind of thrown there by their parents. Whereas like me, I feel like I had this background of like actually like being super passionate about a lot of things and really wanting to learn and always having to teach myself. But with the friends that I made there, I feel like they were kind of just, you know, put in the school by their parents, and all of a sudden they have this app that just makes it a lot easier to just, you know, send a picture and just connect. But I feel like I felt intuitively back then that I was like, oh, this is kind of like dangerous because like people aren't actually, you know, touching each other anymore, communicating with each other anymore. It's like all through this little tiny device. So
In your witnessing, do you feel like it happened in a short amount of time, or was it was kind of slow for
I feel
this?
like it was gradually. Like I remember when I lived in Massachusetts, the first app that I was really excited about that came out was Vine.
Okay.
And there was just a bunch of videos that were unedited that were just like, you know, really funny moments. And I was like, whoa, this is cool. Like, this is really funny. And I like followed some people and everything. And then I think the worst app came out, which was called Musically, and that ended up turning into TikTok basically.
Ah.
But Musically was the first app that came out, and I remember myself being a 12-year-old girl at the time and just being like, wow, like people will like me or think I'm cool if I participate or if I do this. And that was the time in social media where you would have these, you know, young girls that were just, I did it myself. I have videos, but like putting the phone and just like doing these like terrible dances and like lip syncing to these, you know, songs and just posting it and being like, wow, like, is anyone gonna see me essentially? Is
Mm.
anyone gonna think that I'm partaking in this and that I'm cool and that I'm gonna get some kind of outside recognition that's not just my friends anymore, but that can be other people, right? So
Yeah.
at 12 years old, I had an account on Musically that was open to the public. And I was
Mm.
like, whoa, like someone liked it that's like from a whole different country. Someone liked it. I was like, whoa, like that's crazy.
Wow.
Yeah.
And so, reflecting on that with your own journey, did you notice any kind of behavioral changes within yourself? And like, as you experience that in present time, and then having like access to the world at that age?
Mm. I feel like I definitely felt my brain kind of switch from being like, oh wow, I'm gonna be super passionate and use my hands and create all these things to being like, how can I do something that's cool or funny and film it so that other people will think I'm cool and funny, right? And I will kind of start building this online presence. And this for me, I would say, didn't even start then. It's like I have videos on my phone from when I was literally, I think, 7 years old or six, where I was like, uh, I was singing Bruno Mars songs with my friend and my little sister, and we're having like whole like choreographed like music videos and like posting them on YouTube. And like even back then, but like back then it was a lot more innocent because I just, you know, I wanted to sing and I wanted to dance, and I was like, okay, like I want like there's this thing called YouTube where you can actually post a video and other people can see this, right?
Mm.
But I feel like when Musically came out, it was just like people doing these outrageous dances with their hands and lip syncing to these songs, and it was like very kind of consuming, and I felt myself shift for sure from just being like before like making cakes and survival and everything to now being like, oh, like how can I be more liked by more people? Like how can I produce more things, or like how can I, tell more stories, or not even stories, but just like how can I be seen by the world as like cool? Yeah.
Wow, that's a huge shift.
Yeah.
Incredible. And so, how long did that kind of go on for? Were you kind of, did you lean right into that shift, or were you sort of still half half with like obviously the connection to your hands?
So
And
then what happened was we were in Massachusetts for 2.5 years, and my dad was just super isolated out there, and I was not feeling great too because I don't know, I would say Colorado is a lot more community oriented. They have a bigger base for unschoolers. They have like different things you can do. Whereas like Massachusetts, it was this one school and that was it, right? Like everything else is like I would try to always be the group facilitator of my friends, and I'd always try and plan things outside of school. But like the only things we would do is like go to the mall or go to the movies. And it was just so like it just didn't sit right with me. It didn't feel right. And then my dad also just like didn't have any friends there and was just feeling very isolated, and he had a home office and he was just working from home and just being alone every single day.
wow.
And then I remember him sitting us down and being like, yeah, like some things have come up with the company. We had to let go of a few people. We're moving back to Colorado. And I remember, I don't know, feeling anger and feeling shock and just being like, oh my gosh, like in one way, yeah, it's kind of difficult here, but I finally started like making real connections with friends and finally adapted to the school that you guys just threw me in. And now we're going back to Colorado. And then, yeah, and then we moved back to Colorado.
Wow.
So that was a full circle.
Total full circle. And how was it getting back there?
It was actually beautiful because we had a lease on this house that was actually my mom's friend's house a long, long time ago. And we had a backyard that there was a little creek in our backyard. We had an in ground trampoline, and we had a pool,
Ooh,
and we had chickens.
wow.
So all of a sudden I was just there and I was like, oh, wow, I can just be outside all day if I want to. And I can just, actually start grounding myself and reconnecting with the land again.
Mm,
Because in Massachusetts, it's like you have these really long driveways and then you have these big houses, and it's just like so isolated. It's like
mm,
so, and like they're like pretty houses. They have like the siding, they have, I don't know what the word is escaping me right now, but they're just, yeah, it's a completely different vibe versus Colorado. And then being back then, I was like, wow, like I just have to reconnect with the people that I lost connection with again, right? So
wow.
yeah,
And so, how long were you in Colorado for that chapter?
2 years.
Cool.
Mm,
Amazing.
yeah,
What happened after that?
we moved to Slovenia. Yeah.
Wow.
So that was definitely the biggest change. But moving back to Colorado, we got enrolled in this thing called Apex, which is basically structured school for homeschoolers
Hmm.
twice a week.
Okay.
And me and my brother started going because I think my dad had a feeling already back then when we moved back to Colorado that he wanted to eventually move back home and move back to Slovenia.
Yeah.
So he's like, okay, we got to prepare these kids a little bit and like actually teach them some basics. So we started going there, and then I actually learned all of my basic math and basic physics and chemistry on this thing called Khan Academy, which is like this online free kind of server, and they break things down. You have little courses that you can like tap through,
Ah,
and teachers actually break things down in videos. So it's actually really cool. So me and my brother just have our computers and we go to libraries, we go to coffee shops, and we just kind of do it.
mm,
And but I remember when it actually came down to the moment, I had finally again reconnected with all of my friends, started teaching art. It was my first job. I was an art teacher, so that was. I am even thinking about going back to that now because it's just so beautiful sharing a passion like that with little kids. But yeah, then my dad just came to us one day and he's like, I've enrolled you all in a Waldorf school in Slovenia. We're moving in 2 months. And it was, it was really difficult because I had known that my dad got an apartment in Slovenia because my aunt was getting married that summer,
Mhm.
but we were supposed to just go to Slovenia for the whole summer and go to this wedding and kind of be there. I had no idea that we're actually moving there, right? So I think that was definitely the biggest transition for me when it was like, okay, yeah, we enrolled you guys all in school and like we're moving there. And it was very difficult for me. I actually journaled about this, but going from just having this house that was just so connected to nature, having, we had cherry trees, we had chickens, we had the creek, we had the pool, and just being able to be outside all day, to moving to like an Eastern European concrete block and going through that transition, and also just feeling like all of my freedom was taken away from me and I was immersed into a completely new culture. And I ended up sharing my bedroom with my four siblings. So that was probably one of the most difficult things for me too, because being a young woman and developing into a young woman, I didn't have any personal space. It was like when I came home, it was like a hostel. It's like we had like one, two beds, and then one, two beds, and then another bed this way. So it was like all five of us were in that room for 2.5 years.
Wow.
And as much as I love my siblings and I'm so connected with them, it was just quite overwhelming for me.
Yeah. And at this stage, like, what age were you and what age was the youngest?
I was, when I moved to Slovenia, just shy of 15.
Oh,
I was just shy of 15.
yeah.
Yeah.
And your youngest sibling?
My youngest sibling, Dimitri, was 2 years old. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
What a contrast of energy in one room. Um, and so it sounds like, I mean, it's not just like the freedom of Colorado on that return trip. I mean, this is freedom of a lifetime up until that age.
Yeah.
And it sounded like you really were in the most pleasant spot that you'd been in Colorado. And then the kind of mic drop moment that your dad shares with you, say, hey, not only we're moving, but I've enrolled you in school.
Mm-hmm.
And then you go to this concrete block in Slovenia, and now you're in what, a structured school, sharing this room with your siblings. Like, did it land? Like, what was that landing like when it?
Um, I would say the landing wasn't that bad because we moved there in the summer. So we had a little bit of time to adapt, but I will never forget my first day when I went to that school. And for context, I grew up listening to Slovenian my whole life because my dad spoke Slovenian to me, but my mom always responded in English. So then the rest of the family responded in English. So that was our dynamic. So then fast forward me walking into this classroom, I understood everything, but I couldn't really speak.
Wow.
And it was just full on immersion. It was like the first day, first time in my life, I'm in a structured classroom. And I was like, whoa. And I remember everyone that was my age coming up to me and shaking my hand and just feeling like so out of place and just like, am I really here essentially? And then sitting down and having school start and everyone taking out their little notebooks and their little pens. And the teacher started having this lesson, and she's like, Izbom narakovala, which means I'm going to start speaking and you guys are going to start writing what I'm saying.
Whoa.
So that was super difficult because I understood what she was saying, but I had never written one word in Slovenian in my life. So I was just kind of like trying to, use I'm left-handed. So I was using my left-handed brain and just being like, okay, I guess I'm just gonna kind of write down what it sounds like, but just kind of like really like figuring it out and just being, I don't know. I remember also that first day, we have this thing in Slovenia, it's called malca, which is basically like a breakfast lunch kind of break. And it's around 11. And another thing in Slovenia is you can't wear your shoes into the schoolroom, so you have to wear slippers.
Okay.
Which was really strange to me because I'd never worn slippers in my life. But back to the malta, they bring into the classroom this like huge, just like really cheap white loaf of bread. and these like really small like hot dogs, and all the kids just like run over to it and start like putting it on, and I'm just sitting there like, what is this food? Like, I don't know what this is.
Yeah.
And I remember it was super strange because as everyone was, you know, starting to eat and everything, all of the guys went to the back and all of the girls went to the front.
Okay.
And I remember just feeling so out of place and just kind of standing in the middle and just being like, this is so weird. Like, why are all the girls just completely separated from all the guys? Because growing up, I've always had mixed friends. I've always connected with guys and girls, and I never thought it was like only supposed to be one way, right? So then I found myself in that situation, and I was just like, wow, this is so weird. Like, really.
Wow.
Yeah.
And so, how long did it? Because I mean, to understand everything and but not be able to speak it
Mm.
would just be like such a strange paradox,
Yeah.
you know. And so, how long did it take you to learn the language?
So I spoke Slovenian about twice a year, once a year when I went and visited my grandma,
Yeah.
because my dad's mom, she didn't speak even a word of English,
Okay.
so she was just completely. So I'd always kind of have to like growing up, I'd always have to try and speak. So I would say it took me probably about 2 months to actually get the hang of like
Oh, wow.
speaking. I picked it up pretty fast because I was just there in school and everyone was speaking it every single day, right? So I didn't really have another option. And there was this one other girl there that was half black, and her dad lived in the US.
Okay.
And I was like, cool. So like she was like speaking English with me, and I was like, finally I have my one person. And there's this one guy that I'm never gonna forget. His name was Kirill, and he was this Russian kid. He didn't speak a word or understand a word of Slovenian, but he just got thrown in our grade because he was like this professional ballroom dancer. And he
Okay.
like moved to Slovenia, and they're like, okay, you need to like go to a school. So I remember him, just his mentality. He was just like, I don't care. Like, you guys can make fun of me, you guys can anything, I don't care. And I remember just like really looking up to him, being like, I'm gonna be more like him. Like, even if they're making fun of me, even if they're all of this, like, I'm just not gonna care. Like, I'm just gonna try my best and just kind of make it through this year. Um, and the cool thing is, everyone in that school had been learning German.
Mm.
So basically, the structure in Slovenia is from first grade to ninth grade. So from ages, I don't know, 7 to like 15,
Yeah.
you're in the same school room with the same teacher. So I came in the last year, right?
Wow.
And this Russian kid too. And they'd all been learning German at that point for like those 8 years. And when they had their German class, I would teach the Russian guy English.
Nice.
So that was really nice because we had our like 1 hour like every like 3 times a week, and we just get to go out of the classroom, and I just get to have conversations with him, and we'd get to go back and forth and kind of. And I remember one of the things he asked me, he looked at me, he's like, why are your teeth so white? That's also a thing in Europe, is that kids grow up drinking really sweet tea
Okay.
from like a really young age, and they give it to them like right when they start going to like kindergarten, preschool, like all those things. And it leaves a mark essentially. Like, kids don't really know how to brush their teeth, people aren't
Sure.
as strict, you know, so it's like it's different. Whereas, yeah, growing up for me, we had kombucha in our fridge and we had water. That's all we drank. So yeah.
Amazing. So apart from like the white bread and the sausages and like classroom segregation coming eating time, like going from, as we said, so much freedom of this
Mm.
childhood and not in homeschooling, but like no schooling, and then that dynamic of the first school experience. Like, what was that like for you after even a couple of months to, and what was your impression of the school system and
Mm.
learning in that way?
I would say I was very lucky that I got put into a Waldorf school system and not just the normal public school, because it was still like we had this thing called rochna dela where we learn how to sew different things.
Okay.
But I remember that the guys got to sew pants and I had to sew a skirt, and I was so angry because I wanted to sew pants. But so like things like that were really nice. I really connected with my art teacher. Her name was Gospa Banic. Love her to this day. I get coffee with her when I'm back in Slovenia. She's an amazing woman.
Amazing.
She really kind of took me under her wing, and she really was very mean to almost everyone. But for me, she had this like special sweet spot, and she always kind of just like was really excited that I really enjoyed drawing because I feel like all of the kids, you know, they had to do it because it was part of school. But for me, since I was self taught and because I had that experience in the US teaching other kids too, she was just really excited that I really loved art. Um, and then the sports was interesting. There was this one lady that was the sports teacher, and she was so brutal too. And because I had that experience of playing a lot of basketball at my school in Massachusetts, I told her, I was like, I know how to play basketball. And she's like, no, you're going to be with the girls. And like, we were like learning like how to like throw the ball. Whereas like the guys were playing the game. And I was like, no, but like I can play a game. And she's like, you will not talk back to me ever again. You are going to clean up the whole gymnasium when we were done. And
Oh,
it was like, it was crazy because like I just challenged her and being like, I know how to do this already. Like, can you? And she was like, no. So like for me, it was really interesting to feel the segregation between the guys and the girls and how like the traditional, I don't know, like guys can play sports better, girls can do this better, you know. It was like very kind of, I don't know, I just didn't really understand it. And then yeah, I'll never forget that day I had to clean up the whole like sports arena while everyone got to leave and go up, and the like dressing rooms were above, so all of the guys and all of the girls watched me clean up the whole thing too, and it was like this thing to like shame me essentially for speaking back to her. So it
wow.
was like a very kind of interesting dynamic. And then I also had this physics teacher who was just brutal, who was just like, I we took this test and I was really trying to be really, you know, just to understand everything, but there were certain things. It was such a new, you know, all of I was learning it in English and now it was in Slovenian and all of the signs were different in Slovenian. So I was like trying to just catch up with my mind. And we took this one test and my friend, so we had A/B tests, and I didn't know what that meant. I didn't, you know, it was like my first time taking tests ever in my life. And I remember asking him this question when we were taking our test. I was like, please just try and translate this because I don't understand. And he looked at me, he's like, I'm not your translator, you know. And then I was just like, okay. So then I like copied off of my friend, and then he like failed me and told my parents that I cheated, and like there was like this whole thing around that. And then also my biology teacher was this super nice, super hippie lady. She was super, but the guys in my grade like felt that like she wasn't very strict, so they just like be super loud and disrespectful the whole time, so it was hard to actually. And then we have this tradition in my family: when someone turns 14, they get to go on a solo trip with one of the parents
Oh,
for 2 weeks.
cool.
So I went with my dad to Africa for 2 weeks, and I missed all of biology. But it was so worth it. It was such a beautiful experience. But coming back, my parents had to have this like big meeting with the like the chair of the school essentially. And my physics teacher came in, and like the other teachers that like had beef with me, and they're like, yeah, like she can't go to high school, like she needs to repeat this grade, like she needs to do it again. And my parents were like, no, like she's not going to do that, she's not going to repeat the grade, like she's very beautiful, she has a beautiful brain, like she
Mm,
just got put in this situation which is very difficult, right?
yeah.
And then luckily my art teacher and a couple of my other teachers rallied for me, and then I ended up finishing. um, but after that I was just like, I knew deep down that like I gave the system a shot, but that like, I don't know, I was just raised in such a different way that like I just felt like everything that I was trying to do, and even when I was excited about learning something, I was just kind of shot down.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I mean, that's, as you said, you gave it a shot, right?
Mm-hmm.
And this is your experience. And it's like, from what you've shared, that it's one of the most organic childhoods one could really have. And then and knowing that within yourself, and just being like, okay, well, it's done. So what did you do after school? And then ultimately, I mean, you started your own company, right?
Yeah. So when I finished school, I was kind of in a place where I was in a dark space when I was like 15. I felt like an alien. I felt like I didn't belong in that culture. I didn't speak the language perfectly. So Slovenians are very kind of adamant that you like know the language perfectly, or they like correct you, or like they look at you strange. So I kind of just felt so out of place, and I fell into some depression and things like that. And I ended up connecting with some expat kids. And there were Russians and there were Americans, there were Italians, and like all just different third culture kids that were kind of just placed here against their will, essentially. And so then I had that group, but I ended up applying to two different art high schools in Slovenia, and I got into both of them with flying colors because the exam to get into the school was actually like, okay, like create something with your hands. Like I've always been an artist in that sense, where like I love creating things. One of the tasks was like make this like origami formation about like glaciers melting or something like that, right? And I was just like, okay, cool. And then the other one was like they put like lemons and like a couple other like sticks or something on the table, and they're like paint this. And I remember painting the lemons, and they're like purple lemons, and like everything was just like a different color and just like my reflection of like what I felt. And ended up getting in there. But then I remember sitting down with myself and just being like, art is my passion. Like I don't want to be taught it for the next 4 years in a classroom setting. Like I just don't think that that's going to bring me closer to art or just like more inspired. I feel like it's going to do the opposite. It's going to make me actually not like art anymore and not like painting. So, out of boredom going to school for that 1 year, I started brewing kombucha for my parents because we drank a lot of kombucha. We had like these really big bottles in our fridge in Colorado, and we moved to Slovenia, and all of a sudden we had this one kombucha that was in a plastic bottle that was like imported from Portugal, and it just wasn't the real deal. It was pasteurized, it was on the shelf, and like I knew back then even kind of like what real fermentation was and what like something that wasn't actually fermented was, and
Mm.
that it had to be in the fridge, right? And that one wasn't in the fridge, and my parents tried it and they're like, no, like this is terrible. So then I was like, okay, I'm gonna start making it. Like I'm super excited. Like I finally had a passion, and that's kind of what got me through that last leg of school was actually starting to brew kombucha. And started very simple. My dad had an office in the oldest skyscraper in Yugoslavia. It's called Nebotichnik. So it was a fun space, and he had this little side room with like this huge dresser, and he used his room. So he was like, "You can use the side room." And I bought 4 lemonade jars that were about this big that were glass, and I ordered two of the scobies, so the symbiotic culture of bacteria and yeast. I ordered two of them online through Facebook through like these two grandmas from Croatia. And they sent them to me, and they were like in these like plastic bottles, and they were like wrapped up, and I was like, okay. And then began my love affair with kombucha. I basically brewed it for 2.5 years before actually being satisfied with my product and my recipe and actually deciding to throw myself into it. So then that in between period, decided not to go to the art high school,
Mm-hmm.
and I actually homeschooled for 1 year with my mom. And it was cool, but it was very isolating because I was the only person in Slovenia that was homeschooling. It's not a thing there, right? So, but I did have my expat community, and I was getting through, and we'd go to different coffee shops every day, and she was teaching me history and literature and English and things like that, which was eye opening. She's a very smart lady. But overall, after that year finished, I went back to Colorado by myself at 16
Wow.
and flew there. And I started flying across the sea when I was like 12 by myself before they had all the regulations about how old you need to be. But I went back for a full summer, and I lived with one of my old neighbors called Jana, and she had this little studio below her house, and she let me stay there for 2.5 months, and I taught art camps, and I was so happy, and I was like, wow. But then the summer finished, and I was like, okay, like I need to do something else.
Mm.
Like I need to go back home to my family. So I flew back to Slovenia and started brewing kombucha again, essentially started bringing up my passion. And we actually when I made the decision to actually start my company, I wanted it to be called Medusa Kombucha
Mm.
because I was like, wow, this is like crazy lady with snakes, and like that's what I feel like, and it's like wild, and it's wild fermentation. I was like, cool. But Medusa in Slovenian actually means jellyfish. And I was like, okay, the visual aspect of that in kombucha like just might not be so good and like might not be a good selling point. So then I was like, okay, my favorite kombucha in the US is Gigi's kombucha, so I'm gonna just name it Isa Kombucha, and that's gonna be my name. And it started off very slow, so I made a bigger batch, about 50 bottles, and I just started giving it to my friends and everything. And then the initial thought But back then, when I was so young, when I was 16, I was like, I, I'm gonna start selling this at the farmers market, and like I had no idea like what it would actually evolve into. But we our first thing that we did was we tried to actually go to this microbrewery because we wanted someone else to produce the kombucha for us so we could just sell it, right? And that's
Totally.
the easy route. But long story short, kombucha and beer do not mix. Like, obviously, they weren't mixed, but even the particles in the air and the different yeasts and everything mixing is just, it doesn't work.
Yeah.
So we tried to brew kombucha through them in this huge stainless steel tank. And the end product had like 2.5% alcohol, and like right when you opened the bottles there'd be this like horrendous smell from the beer that would just like come into your nose. And I was just like, okay, this is not it, like back to the drawing board. So then I went back to the office, back to my little brewery setup, and there was a lot of brainstorming, and I was like, okay, how do we do this? And then I really sat down with myself and my dad, and I was like, I need to build this whole brewery myself.
Mm.
And we tried so many times to make kombucha on a bigger scale, but figured out that kombucha just needs to be made the way it's been made for the past thousands of years, and that's in really small glass jars.
Mm.
So we're like, okay. So I found this place that was through a nonprofit organization, and it was a horrendous little butcher shop in a basement, and we got it for like 150 euros a month. It was like super cheap because they were going to tear the building down a couple of years later. And got there. The nonprofit was next door, and it was basically a company that hired disabled people and people with different, ailments, and they were making healthy like lunches for people, and that was like their whole business. So then I moved in next door, and I was like, okay, like I need a little extra help, and like me and like three of the workers scrubbed that place for like 2 weeks, like when we got that place, because it was so bad when we moved in. It was, oh. And then we got some people and they poured the floors, and then that was like my first little brewery. And then I started just, working there by myself, and I officially opened my company when I was 17.
Wow,
Yeah.
that's incredible.
Yeah.
So, when you open up this company, what's the next steps after that?
It was not glamorous at all. I was just wearing sweatpants and a t-shirt every single day. And it was very difficult because the position that it was in the basement, right? So I'd be working 16-hour days and I just wouldn't even see the sun. So I just
Mm.
felt like a vampire, and I was kind of going crazy with like the lights too. I was like, whoa. And then I remember I opened it in February of 2020, and then that was right around the peak of COVID too. So that was super difficult. But literally 2 weeks after I officially opened my company, when things were actually supposed to start rolling, and like I was supposed to start making my first bigger official batch,
Mhm.
that was probably going to be like 100 bottles. Um, I was I was with my family and I was unloading the dishwasher, and I bumped these two wine glasses and I completely sliced open the side of my finger.
Ooh.
So I was 17 and I was supposed to be, leading this brewery and like building it. And then I had my hand wrapped like this.
Ah,
I kid
classic.
you not. And I had my hand wrapped like this for 2 weeks. And then I was like, okay, I need help. Like, I can't do this one handed, right? Like, there's no. So I held my first interviews when I was 17 in a little basement. And I put this little ad on this like student service, and I was like, I need people to help me produce this drink. I'm 17, I just started this company, like we're gonna like be producing kombucha. And sure enough, like 15 people responded to my ad. So I'm sitting there with my hand wrapped like this, and I have my little paper. And my dad was very kind of just like, he was my soul. Like, I invested all of the money that I had up until then. I think I had about 5,000 euros saved up through my side jobs and through everything. I invested all of the money I had, and then my dad was the main investor. So he invested for like the first like equipment, the first everything. But he was solely the investor and not the logistics, right? So that was all on me. So I remember he gave me a little tips. I was like, I have no idea how to interview people. Like, what do you mean? Like, and he's like, well, it's really simple. You're gonna get a paper and you're gonna put down 10 different questions about regarding kombucha, about their previous work experience, blah, blah, blah. And then after you finish all the interviews, you're going to take a moment, go through all the papers, and really just let your intuition tell you which one is the best fit. Right? So they're coming in with, and I have my hand wrapped like that. And then I'm asking them the questions. I'm like, you got this. Like, you need help. Like, I can't do this myself. And I ended up, yeah, in the end of the day, I ended up finding these two girls that were both students at the time. And one of them was Russian, another one was Slovenian. Their names were Anna and Nina. And they started helping me out once a week. And in the beginning stages, we got our first bottling machine, which was this little machine about this big. And we'd put like 20 liters of kombucha on the top, and then you'd have this switch in the back that you'd hit down, and it would fill up 6 bottles, and then you'd put it up, and then you'd move the bottles ahead, and then you put all the tops on one by one, and then we'd have this labeler that you do by hand. And then I was in charge of the branding, so I wanted there to be like a handwritten element. So for the first year of my company, I would just have students that were employed that would literally just be sitting after the labels were put on and just be writing the date on the bottles. And every single one, I was like, I want it. And even if you have different handwriting, I want that. I want there to be a feeling that there's an actual human that, like finished this off essentially.
Beautiful.
And I want to touch on the branding really fast too, because I had to pitch my product, and it wasn't even the final product because my dad convinced me to only use sencha tea. So my kombucha is composed of sencha and yerba mate.
Wow.
And yerba mate has a lot of caffeine in it. So I used just yerba mate, and the alcohol percentage was too high. So then I cut it with sencha. But my dad convinced me just to use sencha. And the end product was just like very vinegary and like no bubbles. And I like wasn't proud of it. And I knew that I should have put the yerba mate too. And but it's all I had. So I had to pitch it to this round table of like 10 designers that were going to help me with like my first like brand discovery session. Like, who are you? Like putting everything together. And I pour in this cup, and I have my little PowerPoint presentation. I'm like standing there. This is even before I opened my company too, when I was like building up the branding. And we went through the whole process. I was there for a week, just like the why, the how, the purpose, everything. And they sent me the final draft. And literally, I was 16 at the time. I was like, I don't like it. And my dad's like, what do you mean you don't like it? Like, we literally gave them like a percentage of our company to like do this whole thing for you. Like, you need to like use it. And I was like, no, like, I'm an artist. Like, I can do it better, like myself. So I spent 20 hours plus just kind of like watching YouTube videos on how to use Adobe and trying to like figure out how to implement my own thing. So the last thing I did, I used some of the elements of their design, but I'm very hands-on. Do you know what a lino cut is?
Yes.
Yes. So I had a lino cut, and I hand carved my logo.
Wow.
And I stamped it. And then I hand carved this thing that says kombucha, and I stamped that. And then I took the file, and I was like, okay, remove the background. And I put my stamps in, and I sent it back to them. And I was like, this is my brand. I was like, this is what I want. And I remember my dad having this lecture. He's like, one thing you need to know about business is that you can't do everything. And I was like, yeah, but it's my product with my name on it. So like there has to be my art and like my, contribution to it too.
Beautiful. Beautiful.
Thanks.
That's incredible. So when you talk about the production side of things as well, and obviously it's like it's so handcrafted, then at what stage did the company really start kind of taking off? And then how does one, navigate that?
So having my dad as a backer, he's a very kind of fast growth person. Like he wants to see the numbers going up, right? And how everything started was I made my first batch with like 200 bottles, and then you have to start selling it, right? So that was the most like actually like being thrown into cold water was age 17. I had to do door-to-door sales, and in a language that I didn't fully speak. And I had to pitch a product that no one had ever heard of. Like it was a very new thing. I think there was only one other brand that was like kind of like developed at the time that I started my company in Slovenia. So yeah, going door to door, and I had this little box that was like this little cooler box, and I would take 6 bottles with me at a time, and I had these tiny little flyers that I made with like my email on them and my number. And I would just go door to door. And one of the first people I got, I was so proud of myself. It was, I think, the second place I went to. First place said no. I went and I go in there and I'm like, is the owner here maybe? And the girls look at me and they're like, yeah, but he's like sitting over there in the corner and he's like eating like his lunch. So like don't interrupt him. And I like go over to him and I'm like, hi, like I don't want to interrupt, but like could you give me like 2 minutes of your time? And I remember him looking at me and he was like, no, 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 like I don't have time right now. Like I don't, like just go. And I was like, please, I just started my company like 3 weeks ago and I have a product that I think you'll like. Because this place was basically a cold pressed juice place. And
Mm.
that's my main ingredient in my kombucha that makes it really tasty is that I process all superfoods and fruits and then put it into my kombucha.
Wow.
Um, and went up to him and I was like, I have this product that I think you'll really like. I was like, literally just give me 1 minute. I'll pour it in a cup for you. You're gonna try it. And if you don't like it, I'll walk out. And he looks at me and he's like, okay, go get a cup. So I go over and I get a cup and I like open it and the bubbles come up. I was like, these are like natural bubbles. Like it's naturally fermented. Like there's no added CO2. And he's like, okay, like quit the pitch. Just let me try it. And I was like, okay. So like I only had one flavor at the time too that I launched with. It's called razzmatazz and it's raspberries and ginger. So I pour it in the cup for him and he takes a sip and he looks at me and he's like, wow, this is actually really good. He's like, tell me more about yourself.
Mm.
And then I started with my story that I'm 17 years old and that I've been making it for 2 years and that I really believe in good quality kombucha with no BS. And he looks at me and he's like, you got yourself a customer. And I remember just being like, yes. I was like, that worked. And to this day, so I've been with them now for 6 years, I am the only outside product that they have.
Wow.
Everything else that they have in their shop, they have 3 different shops. It's called Barbarella Juice Bar, is in-house. So they make everything. They even have their own bottled water, like everything they have. And then they have me. So
Wow.
I was super proud of myself. And then that just continued. And I went to probably a total of 65 places, just door to door to door. I was like, okay, these are kind of like a health food brunch place, health food this, whatever, let's go. And out of all of them, my percentage rate was about 50%. I just
Wow.
kept pursuing, yeah. And obviously I knew the trick was like you can't talk to any of the people that work there. You need the boss, you need the person that makes, you can't even talk to like the supply manager because they're still not the one that's gonna make the calls, right?
Sure.
So ended up getting 30 different places and that was my initial cash flow and initial start to my business. And then luckily we connected with this guy that was a distributor before I even started my company and COVID really hit and everything closed.
Mm.
All the cafes, everything. It was like like there was social distancing, there was, like you couldn't there was police hour in Slovenia. It was crazy. It was like there was so much control on us. And I remember the day after everything closed, I was in a space where I was just like, well, that's it. Like, I need to close my company. Like, I can't sell it anymore. Like, if all the places that I just got into and I just started selling, close, like, the day after that happened, I get a call from this guy, Alesh, and he's like, you're never going to believe what happened. And I was like, what? And he's like, well, you know how I've been pitching your product to like some of the bigger people? I was like, yeah. And he's like, you got into DM, which is basically Slovenia's biggest like pharmacy
Wow.
with all different, stuff. And I was like, are you serious? And he's like, yeah, they put you into all 90 locations. And I was like, wow. I was like, okay, we're gonna have to like start like producing more, but I was like really excited. And yeah, so that was a beautiful God moment for sure that it just all aligned that way. And all of a sudden we had 90 locations and it just jump started. And I was super proud because I was the first glass bottle that they had in the refrigerator
Wow.
and the first kombucha. So I was like, that's really cool, right? And I remember the first week that they all ordered one box with like the one flavor. And they thought they were only gonna, sell the one box and they all sold out
Wow.
in the first week. So then the next order that they put in, they all put in two. And then on the other hand, the operations, because, being so young, I had to wear all of the hats,
Mm.
right? I had to be operations, I had to be marketing, I had to be sales, I had to be everything. I had to be management of everything that was going on. And I was like, okay, we need to start, building up this team. Like we need more support. Like I can't do it all alone. And that's when we really started kind of, you know, making more bottles. And I would say that I'm so proud that in that year and a half, we ended up moving to a new space.
Mm.
That was the most difficult move of my life. And I've moved so many times, but was moving production from point A to point B. It
Mm.
was only about 3 kilometers, but moving all of the glass, all of the scobies, all of the everything. So if you want like a mental picture, I was like in the back of this van, just like holding everything and just like shut in the van and just like praying that like everything just didn't go flying, because it was very fragile, everything that we were moving. And the most difficult thing about the whole process was that production couldn't stop.
Yeah.
So we had to actively scale to a new facility, a new brewery, while everything was still in action, still in rotation, because we had all of these fulfillments to make, right? So we
Mm.
moved to this bigger place, we got our first thing, but I don't know. It taught me so much. And there was so many moments where it just felt like everything was falling apart and everything was breaking and everything was getting delayed. And there was even a point where we had to order different bottles that were really ugly because our bottles from China got like delayed and like the ship just like missed like one of the things. And there's so many moments like that where you just kind of have to adapt and you have
Mm.
to overcome. And that's all you can do, right?
Absolutely.
Um,
Just for everybody listening, when you say, oh, we're going to produce more, what are we talking about? What are the
uh-huh.
numbers?
I would say my scaling was I went from producing 100 bottles a week, and then when I left the company, we can produce 18,000 a week now.
Wow.
So
On that one connection alone, how much did you have to increase productivity?
oh, so much. So much. I mean, all of a sudden it was like we had orders that were coming in weekly now. Whereas
Mm.
like before it was like the coffee shops were like, yeah, like we'll see like how much people drink it. And like there's a lot of like more like marketing entailed.
Yep.
And now all of a sudden like in stores, in a refrigerator that people are walking by every single day all around Slovenia, right? So it was crazy. It was crazy. It really was. But
That is incredible, honestly, because it's like, you're still putting your handcrafted touch to
mm,
this, to each and every bottle, and then to like go from that kind of scale.
mm,
And it, as you said, like the consistency, and
mm.
like you couldn't stop.
We couldn't stop. That was the most difficult part for sure. Was like I wish we had like 2 months to just set everything up, but we didn't. Like everything just had to keep flowing as we were moving to this new space. And luckily, when we moved to the new space, when everything got set up,
Mm.
it took us probably a month and a half, but we got a bottling machine that made our lives so much easier because all of a sudden, all of the steps that we were doing by hand,
Mm.
this one machine was doing, right?
Amazing.
And we got a handwritten font that was actually, I think, my handwriting or one of my coworkers, and we programmed it into this thing, and it was printed on. So it still looked like it was handwritten, but it wasn't actually handwritten because of the time. But I think I'm most proud that when we were in that space, there was a period of time where 15 of us were working at a time.
Wow.
We're all doing different things. One person was doing boxes, one person was doing stickers, one person was doing bottles, one person was doing fruit. It was just like all over the place. And now 2 people can manage it because that was the work essentially, was doing the optimization and being like, how can we make this have a flow and have it make sense, and like bring this rack here, lift it up with the forklift, and then start putting the jars on. Whereas before, everything was like one jar by one jar, carrying it to the other room, and it just didn't make any sense. But that was where the real work was for sure.
Wow. That's incredible streamlining in terms of efficiency to 15 to 2
Mm-hmm.
and to like continue that manufacturing. Wow.
And
So
I almost vlogged the whole process too.
really,
So that was kind of my approach to marketing. Whereas like my dad was like the older generation. He's like, no, like we have to have product pictures. We have to have everything. I was like, that's boring. No one wants to know about that. I was like, people want to know about like what I'm doing on a day to day. So I'd start vlogging my days at the brewery, and I really built up this community that I wasn't afraid to share my failures. I was like, I
Mm,
want to be as, transparent with people about the downsides of this too. And that's all not just because I think a lot of people that aren't in the business area that like to romanticize business a lot, but I don't know, having a real physical product just comes with so much baggage and so much things that you can't even think about. So I
mm,
think just trying to be as transparent with people as I possibly could, and when things went really, really wrong, updating them and being like, this happened and like it's terrible, but like I'm gonna move forward and like this is the reality. And like I feel like a lot of people saw me as this like, like really successful like business girl, and like I would go to events. I was an events manager too. So I'd like get all dressed up and like be happy and be with my friends, and like people saw that side of me. But then like through my Instagram too, it was like sweatpants,
mm.
t-shirt. I had to process like 90 kilos of raspberries, and it kind of looked like I murdered someone. So I just have it all over my arms, right? And it was just like very intense hands-on work. And now I touched on that before with you before we started recording, but just like I have very bad back problems from all of the things I was lifting because we had like 25 kilopounds of sugar that I was just like hauling around, and like tea and like jars, and just like bending over, and just like it was a lot. So yeah.
It's honestly incredible, like,
Thank you. Thank you.
phenomenal. And do you feel like growing up with the social medias, things like that, if you felt more comfortable showcasing? Because I mean, when you talk about what you just shared, like adding so much humility and being
Mm.
really transparent with just the whole journey, do you feel that that really added a lot of value to your brand and also to your authenticity of how you showed up?
Oh, for sure. I think there's a lot of pluses and minuses because I took the approach of making my brand a very, very personal brand. And I sold it through my story and through my life. And that's how I leveraged myself. But also reflecting, I think, back to when I was a kid. I always loved, like when I was 4 years old, I'd like write stories and my mom would write them down for me, right? But I'd like tell them and be like, I've always just been a storyteller, and just like sharing that with people and like having that connection, I think has been always really like, deeply rooted in myself.
Yeah.
So having that approach, yeah, but I also got to a point where I was just like, I don't want to pay for ads anymore. Like I just want to do everything organic. Like I want the right people are going to find me at the end of the day, right? And like
Yeah.
I want to sell I want to sell a lifestyle and a feeling and this beautiful alive drink,
Mm.
instead of just being like, this is the product, and this is why you should buy it, and this is, so having, yeah, that non-traditional approach, and definitely growing up and getting eased into social media, I think definitely gave me a lot of confidence in that sector for sure.
Beautiful, honestly beautiful. So, I mean, we're in Vietnam right now.
Mm.
What's happening with the company? How was the kind of that last little bit of the chapter
Mm.
for that?
I would say that I'm a chronic overachiever.
Beautiful.
And the past couple years in my company have been very intense for me mentally, because I got to a space where I really feel like people perceived me in a different light than I perceived myself. And
Mm,
people would think that I had everything figured out, but I felt super empty. So it was always just kind of this, I don't know, I always kind of just didn't feel fulfilled by it anymore. And I feel like I got to a certain space where we tried to expand so many times, and I had deals with people in the UK and London. I was supposed to move to London. I was supposed to, we were supposed to expand into all of Croatia, Italy, like, but I feel like the more that I tried to really just focus on growth, 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 the more I kind of lost myself in the process and lost my passion towards why I even started this company in the first place. And I think through all of that and just leading the team and the optimization and the growth and everything, I had two very extreme burnouts where I just literally, I like to say I felt like a potato. Like I felt like I didn't have any artistic capabilities. I didn't have any drive. I just felt like I was stuck in this one place, and it
mm,
was it was brutal. So I moved back to Colorado by myself, and I moved to the most remote ranch in Colorado. There was like no people, and I lived on this ranch, and I took care of 12 horses and 4 dogs. And it was the most beautiful time of my life because I just needed that reset. I needed not just constantly being surrounded by people and noise and expectations, but just having that time where I could just be with myself and be fully myself, I think was very important. And I think a lot of my therapy I have done through animals and through the way I talk to myself and just being there and just being able to hop on a horse and go on a trail ride and like have just so much land and so much just, I don't know, it gave me a lot. Um, and then it was complicated because I don't know, starting a company with your family is very interesting. And I had this feeling, I think, almost for the last 2 years that I'm made for something more.
Mm.
Not necessarily like it was the best teacher in the world. And I think a lot of people in Slovenia didn't understand why I chose to, in the end, exit my company.
Mm.
But I got to this point where I feel like I kind of gave it all that I had. And I feel like I knew in myself, the more I was just continuing to push and the more I was trying to just create things, the more it felt forced.
Mm.
And I just didn't feel aligned with it anymore. But it was, it was a long time in the making. Like it was 2.5 years of just kind of having this feeling, but always having this other feeling, which was guilt and which was like, okay, I need to see this through. I need to keep growing, keep, continuing. Like this is the only thing I have. I don't have college. I don't have high school. I don't have, other really work experiences besides my art job. I was like, I put all of my eggs in one basket, so I need to see this through. Um, but yeah, I had a very traumatic time in Colorado in the end of the day. A lot of things went west, and I was working really random jobs. I was a lawn mower, a social media manager, a gallery painter, like all of these just strange things, but I didn't really have any stability. And I ended up getting in two car crashes. And the second one, my friend was actually driving, but proved to be a very big financial burden.
Mm.
And that actually sent me back home. And I had to go back to square one. I had to live in, my parents call it the Harry Potter room with my parents. And yeah, I had to completely be stripped of everything and just kind of go back to my company and just be there. And I worked my way up the whole year, day by day. And I went through a lot of trauma, I think mentally too. I was in a relationship, a lot of different things were moving around, but I went daily up this mountain. I would run up this mountain and I'd listen to this psychology podcast and I'd be like, yes, I'm doing it. And I just focused on work, hyper focused. And I had this wedding that I was supposed to go to in Australia. I ended up actually staying in Vietnam, but that was the thing that actually gave me hope or like some kind of light at the end of the tunnel because I was like, okay, I'm gonna just put my head down. I'm not gonna have friends. I'm just gonna really focus on my mental health and really focus on my company and kind of, closing this chapter in a really gradual way. So I give myself like the full year, and from last March until, the end of the year, until January 1st, I worked. And yeah, I started painting again, which gave me a lot of healing. I made some really big formats that I actually sold, which I was really excited about. And then on January 1st, I decided to exit the company and I booked a one-way ticket to Bangkok, and here I am now. So, yeah,
Absolutely incredible.
having this wonderful conversation with you. So,
Yeah,
yeah.
that's so beautiful. And like, what a way to really like dive in to a learning and lived experience. You know,
Mm.
like I mean, it's you just said it before. Like you put all your eggs in this one basket, but it's a basket that not many people even take on at any phase of their life, let alone at that age. And wearing all those hats all at once and like expanding the way that you did and like, embracing breakdown, but then coming back and like finding your own forms of therapy and reconnecting to
Mm.
self and then setting up these, it's taking on such a monumental task. It's beautiful that you kind of, what it sounds like, you found yourself, lost yourself, found yourself, and like went on this personal journey whilst, developing skills that could normally take a lifetime. Very, very powerful.
Thank you. Thank you for that reflection. It's good to hear it from another perspective because I think my biggest struggle that I've had over these past couple months too is just, myself, and
Mm.
just always feel like I think the reason I moved to Vietnam right now is just to really focus on slowing down and not needing so much all the time because my life in Europe was just very, very fast paced
Mm.
and just always wanting more and striving for more and always. And then when I did have that time in Europe, when I got to the top and I had, the best apartment and I had the best friend group and I had, all of my events that I was planning and I was super happy and I was doing really well financially. And I remember just feeling so empty inside and just being like, wow, I did all of these things, but like there's more. I can feel that there's more, right? So, yeah.
Beautiful.
Thank you.
Thank you for sharing your story.
Thank you so much.
And now, this part of the podcast being your medicine. So, just reflecting back, what has become your medicine through your personal journey?
I think it's come to me in the past couple days, or like gradually over the past couple months, but I'm going to show my little water bottle. It's attention. And I had this actually on my Instagram bio for a long time, and I had attention as practice, but I didn't really feel into it. And I didn't really know fully what it meant, but this word just kept coming to me more and more. And when I moved here, I was still in the mentality that I just needed to create more and share more and just grow this online presence and get an online job, and had so many expectations for myself. And I got to a point where I felt like I was sharing for other people and not for myself. And then I decided to, on February 8th, I decided to deactivate my Instagram and take a complete hiatus and just some time away. And so that's been this past month. And just really being aware of what I give my attention to and what's worthy of my attention. Because I feel like in this day and age, with so much all the time, it's like we don't feel bored anymore. We just, at the touch of a screen, we can have access to the whole world and just this endless scroll of just content that's coming in. And I feel like it's really easy for ourselves to just kind of go through this life in a passive state and just constantly be consuming. So I think my medicine is just being aware of what I give my attention to and for how long, essentially, and really trying to kind of be like, okay, like I think through this past month, I really do, like, I've gotten my attention span back. And like a lot of people say now, like the average person's attention span, if you're on all the social medias and everything, is like 7 seconds.
Wow.
And I was in that headspace for a really long time where I was like, okay, I know how to manipulate the algorithm. I know exactly what it wants. I know exactly the hooks to put up so people will, engage with my content. And I did. I grew my community and it helped out. But I got to a certain point where I was like, it's just too fast, everything, right? It's too, even if you have the best hook and you get everything, like, what are the actual chances that that person remembers that reel, or that that person remembers that thing that you posted because it was so fast, right? So I think really just being mindful about slowing down in all aspects of my life and my social media and my day to day, and actually just giving myself time and paying attention to things more, to actually being like, okay, I'm going to give myself 2 hours right now and actually just read this book, or I'm going to walk around Vietnam and I'm not going to have anything plugged in. I'm just going to listen to the sounds and just be present. And I think through this whole journey, I've caught myself just, first of all, not checking my phone really at all anymore, which I'm so happy about, and just being actually present in the moment, enjoying company. Where I feel like before I was always had like this thought, oh, but I could do this, or but I could post this, or but it was always like very kind of shaky ground. And yeah, being here, slowing down, and not thinking that it's this race and that you're behind, or that I feel like a lot of people tend, or I feel like especially the new generation of people on Instagram are super just like they don't even feel like they should start because everyone's so ahead of them, and because this person has had an account for this much time in A and B. But yeah, That's been my reflection.
Wow. Beautiful reflection.
Thank you.
Is there anything in any kind of form that you would like to share with the audience on this last little note?
Mm, just that I feel like it's really important for us as humans to connect more in the physical space and to actually be in each other's companies. Because even being here in Vietnam and being in this kind of bubble of people that are, digital nomads, and it can feel at times, at least to me, just a little bit, forced and not like it's actually really genuine, but just being in moments with people where you don't feel like you have to take any pictures or you have to do anything. Just enjoying each other's company, I think, is really important. And I'm a big person. I really think people need hobbies using their hands. And like, it's still so cool to me that you made this table, But like, actually having that craft is like, that's something that's dying in this world.
Mm.
And everyone wants the easiest possible job that you don't have to put any work into, and that you can just, sell your online digital course. But like, how important I feel like it is for your mental health to do anything with your hands and your actual hands, right? And like, I love crocheting and I made my bag. I love painting. I love just writing pen and paper, and just having that flow. But really, I feel like the only thing, I even did a post yesterday about like, I feel like there's this one graph that I think about quite often where it's like, right, it's the monkey, and then the monkey slowly, turns into the human, and then the human's walking, and then the human starts going back into like this pose.
Yeah.
And I feel like it's true because like the pose that we're in, and even, being aware of my surroundings, is like everyone just has their head down and their hands like this and is just scrolling, right? And just, yeah, really, I feel like using your hands is something that's so meditative, so empowering, so just being in a space like that where it's just, okay, me and my hands, and let's actually create something with them. So, yeah.
Very beautiful words.
Thank you.
Isa, it's been an absolute pleasure. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you. It's been beautiful.
Thank you very much. Well, there you have it. Isa's story. Upon reflection, thinking about this story, I found it quite remarkable that when one is intuitively led to their own personal education, how you can really hone in on what it is you actually want to learn. See, I think that it's so easily designed to kind of cover so much of so many topics, but is that actually really efficient? And listening to the actual amount of freedom that Isa had in her childhood, at first it was trying to comprehend that to how it really would have felt. There's always pros and cons with everything that we do, but to grow up on the land, within nature, connected to the truth of what is actually happening, meaning there is societal differences, there's cultural differences, there's environmental differences, and seeing them for what they are, not necessarily going into an organization, an organized space to learn particular curriculum and to learn about things that might not actually be necessary. Because I'm sure that we can all reflect on that educational experience and question what was actually really necessary and what wasn't. And I understand that not everybody is designed or has the capacity for that kind of freedom, because structure is also a beautiful thing. It can create boundaries, it creates framework, it gives an opportunity to learn particular types of routine. But it's interesting that I think when applied to the right person, that freedom is a canvas. It's a way of truly connecting with self and then using that self connection as an expression. interesting too, the moving around and how that actually plays out, knowing that movement is a beautiful thing. And I think the thing that stood out for me was imagining even myself at 7 years old and doing a substantial move, like moving to India, moving countries, and doing it with my family and leaving everything behind. That art of letting go is probably one of the most powerful things a human being can adapt, is the ability to let go on all levels. Because it's the attachment that we have to people, places, and things that cause that suffering. But there's so much that one can learn with the desire for things, the want for things. It's not, I believe it's not necessarily the want for things that is bad, but is it your ability to be able to let it go even if you have it. I think this is what really rings true, is one can have anything that they want, but do they have the capacity to be able to also let it go when they've got it? And so hearing that in Isa's story really resonated with me, because fundamentally learning that at such a young age, I believe really sets you up for not only non-attachment, but also too to be able to focus in on what is important, what is actually necessary, and what is one bringing into their life to create that sense of comfort, security, and ease. Because ultimately, the greatest lessons are learned through discomfort. But it's also us who curate our lives to be as comfortable as possible, making stepping into that discomfort even harder and even more challenging. So when one has learned how to let go and learn what is on the other side of discomfort, then there's a really nice equanimity that can be created, because learning the art of balance, in my opinion, is the art of life. And to see how parents can really push forward with their own dreams and desires and how that reflects on the childhood experience. And as Isa's father was doing a startup company in those early days, and how that would have looked and felt. From even that story, there's so many different perspectives of what it would have been like to be Isa's parents. Of course, what it was like to be Isa, what it was like to be her siblings, being a bit younger, growing up in that time, in that generation. And I really want to make a point of the Gen Z experience and how beautiful it was to have somebody come on and represent Gen Z in a very authentic and pure way. Because when I first met Isa and she shared parts of her story with me, I was truly taken back by how one can already have achieved so much in such a short amount of time. And I don't necessarily look at life as it is this one giant achievement, but it's more about what it takes to put yourself in those positions, to fully trust and surrender to the unknown. And what is on the other side of that then becomes an achievement. And for me, that is what rings out. That is what I hear when I connect with people, is what has somebody consciously stepped into and overcome. And I believe they are the badges that we wear of achievement. It's not necessarily like a piece of paper, but it's what it took to get that piece of paper, and how that correlates in your life of experience. Like what teachings were within that, what lessons were learned, what had to be let go of, what is now understood, and not only understood, embodied and self-actualized. This is what really stands out for me when I listen to people's stories. And I know that from someone who's had their own businesses, it is a beautiful grind in the most authentic way, because it becomes this mirror of self. And just like a business, it reflects what is actually truly happening from within. Because there's things that we are resisting that hold our greatest truths. And doing it for Isa at such a young age is just so beautiful because, as we mentioned in the podcast, what an education. What a way to show up, to really put it all on the line and to learn and surrender within that teaching. I think there's a lot to be said for anyone who chooses to embark on a journey of the unknown and the what ifs, and particularly when you've got to wear all of the hats. You know, that is the common thread that sits between business owners, regardless of what the business is and regardless of its successes. It's learning to navigate wearing all of those hats all at once, and then also being a human being and also having the other side of the coin and the other parts of life. And I think that when you see another business operator, you kind of meet each other at that eye level because you recognize, you see yourself in them, as I'm sure they see themselves in you. And it's knowing that this is what is happening and what happens behind the scenes. So when Isa shared her story, and it was almost a full circle in the way of her company, and then the lessons and the teachings that she gained through that to then return back to self. And even within her medicine, really focusing on detail and the attention to detail, meaning like where, as she said, like where are we putting our attention and how much of our attention is being taken away from us. I mean, this is a very conscious thought and something to really sit with because there's so many distractions in this world, an overwhelming amount of distractions. And unless we're the ones to really catch ourselves and be aware of where we're falling short or giving too much of our time or losing our attention, then how are we ever to know? I mean, time is the most precious commodity. But if we're literally giving away our time through distractions, then it's evaporating. And it's one thing to be aware and there's another thing to be stoic. But I think finding a nice balance, finding a balance of what is true and what is actually serving you in a positive way. So to come around full circle and to recognize that even though a company has given you so much, taught you so much, and you have equally given your whole being to this, that recognizing that it's also taking. It might be taking too much. It might, in fact, be a detriment, even though it was a blessing. And I love that polarity. I think that polarity is what can only be experienced within the experience. It comes through as the deeper teachings. And just like anything in life, you know, they say that hindsight has 20/20 vision, of course, because it can see clearly. But I believe that everybody that comes into our lives are teachers, whether you know them for a minute or whether you know them for a lifetime. Because we're only going to ever meet a certain amount of people in our life. And so there's a significance to that. There's a teaching within that itself. And I'd like to use the external as a reflection of not only my internal, but also what is coming up within me. How does that and why does that feel the way that it does? And where did that come from? You know, curiosity in a beautiful and humbling way. So there was a lot of curiosity and a lot of adventure and a lot of freedom that came through in that podcast that I reflected on. And it really warmed my heart to be able to sit with a person who has had an upbringing experience like that. And not only within that itself, but also to the courage and strength to step into a company and an offering for the world. And capitalizing on youthful energy and youthful resilience, I think, is a very beautiful way to step into adulthood and the way and the gifts that are always yet to come. So I'm very grateful to have Isa on the show. It was wonderful to hear her story and to see how it is not only played out and unfolded in her life, but to get to spend time with somebody who I believe has an old head on a young body, a true old soul. Wisdom beyond her years, but also incredibly present and also excitingly youthful. So, once again, thank you for taking the time to listen. If you would like any, so thank you for taking the time to listen. It's a pleasure doing these podcasts as it's something that comes very natural to me. I very much enjoy holding space, but I'm more excited about hearing the inner workings of how somebody connects with their own personal experience. And I believe that everything ties back to the self. And the more that one can connect with who they truly are, the more that they can align to the life that they are destined to live. So if anybody feels called to reach out and would like to understand more of how their world is unfolding, then I'm always here for a chat. So there you have it, a 23-year-old renegade who took the time to learn about herself early and convert that into gifts for the world. If you would like to follow her journey, head to @_ISASIS. And if you would like to see more of what I do, head over to www.plumplains.com for all the information. My name is Taylor Jardine, and this is Your Story, Your Medicine. Thank you for taking the time to listen.